I will quickly now introduce the session and the speakers. So as you all know, the session today is to talk about the urban poor. And it is the 17th of December, and it's the day that marks the self-immolation of Bouazizi. And we thought that what a better way to sort of remember or reflect on this moment is to actually reflect on the conditions and the circumstances of urban poor, especially in the past 10 years. I'm also very happy that we will have two speakers who will talk both about different geographical locations, Tunisia and Egypt, but also from different disciplinary vantage points. Omnia Khalil is a PhD candidate at the Graduate Center City University of New York anthropology program. Her research and writings focus on city violence, political economy, and gentrification, cross-cutting with anthropology of revolution. Since 2008, Khalil focuses as an urban researcher on community participatory action planning, and she has led many projects in Cairo working with local communities. Omnia, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. So I will start to share my screen and then I'm gonna read. And I'm not gonna be short as Laila, I'm sorry, but I will try not to go much over time.
That's
and
good.
Yeah. And thanks Dina, Naira, and Amr, and everyone who's behind all of this organization. And I'm happy to see many faces actually who I do miss this year, not seeing for so long. So yeah. And I have two little kittens, so if they just like jump, I mean, forgive me, but I can't do anything in this.
My cat will also probably join at some point, so don't worry.
So I'm trying to share the screen, but it says that host disable attendee screen sharing. What should I do?
Yeah, we will give you, I think, a co-hosting abilities. So
yeah, perfect. Thank you. You can see the screen now, right? Oh, no.
Maybe we, yeah, now, yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So to start, my paper is titled The Urban Frontier, Cairo, Cities That We Will Not Recognize. And I'm starting with the urban frontier, which is a concept that came up in the literature coined to the previously expression to sociologist Ruth Glass of gentrification, who is to your left. And gentrification started as a class war aiming to reuse the lands and re-engineer the city into a machine of money, commodifying the lands of the city directly manipulated by the ruling classes and their power positionality within the world. The frontier is everyone who could not win into this battle, the women, the poor, the singles, and the underprivileged. Many processes led to accumulation by this position, referring to Harvey, is how to put gentrification and urban frontier together. And to your right is Neil Smith, who coined who wrote a lot about the idea of the urban frontier as a concept. So Cairo as a city defined to be a global city by having its new offices hub at satellite settlements like 6th of October and New Cairo, as you can see in the photos, and moreover in Bula Abu Ala. Another layers of cosmopolitanism is added over history above each other through Cairo's urbanization, in addition to a layer of neoliberalism, which is started, long ago, but I'm marking the year of 1996, as this was the year marked the first wall-gated community to be built in Egypt, which is Dreamland by Ahmed Bahgat. And this actually was an expansion among the middle class to get mortgage and to stay within a safe zone in order to have a certain quality of life and also a securitization aspect of their own. The neoliberalism policies were interrupted by the Egyptian Revolution of 2011. Those the 2000s, Gamal Mubarak, who had plans to neoliberalize the country among his businessmen fellows. One example I'm giving here of gentrification and commodification, which I did like a long field work at, was Ramlet Bula, which is part of Bula Abu Ala district. And the Nile City Towers were built after privatization of many plots that contained workshops and factories where the residents worked at. Within the years of 1996 up to 1999. And these plots were privatized, demolished, and the construction of the towers started. The families who lost their jobs tried to find other alternatives of precarious labor instead of being working class. But soon after the construction started, the business owner found a highlight within the residential spot that can extend their project to another two high-rising towers. And violence has been multi-layered within the small geographical spot, and the people of the city at Ramle Boulay have been crushed within the rules of neoliberalism and the lawless country. Modernity and the nation state created the democratic tools of governing, combining this with a political economy of neoliberalism, caused the crisis within the modernity project of manifestations organized the life between the rulers and the government. Within the revolutionary context of the Egyptian revolution in 2011, that was followed with a military coup in 2013. The coup crushed any possibilities of political participation. Moreover, democratization. The regime established itself through militarized, forcible performances that manifested numbers of massacres over bodies and put people in jail for their lifetime. July 2013, the regime started by crushing the Muslim Brotherhood groups, their leaders and their supporters, then turned to January 2011 allies to deliver a clear message by putting them in jail. These oppressive moves didn't stop, neither politically nor socially. The regime of Sisi wanted to make sure that they established a ruling regime that is unbreakable, and that what happened in January 2011 to Mubarak and what happened in July 2013 to Morsi regime will not be repeated again. The more the regime wanted to establish itself, the more it crushed the bodies and voices of any other. The neoliberal authoritarianism manifested through a nationalist discourse, declaring how the military is great and they will be reawakening the nation towards a new pathway of development. The meta-narrative of the state highlighted the crisis of Egypt, that we are at a war times and we need to fight against anyone who would harm the nation. A masculine militarized voice hegemonized this discourse. Moreover, the nation became a family with a lead of one household who had a managed patriarchal voice and give orders to his family, claiming that he knows what's good for the nation. The atmosphere politically and socially felt like no voices are going to raise above the voice of the war. The government started with a new urban agenda of national vision called Egypt Sustainable Development, which you see to your left now. Egypt's SDS, which is Egypt Sustainable Development Strategy 2030. And the vision includes many economic and environmental pillars and projects. Many mega projects were first introduced, like the upgrading of the Suez Canal and the new administrative capital in the desert. Okay, let's say it's the desert now. To implement such a size of investment, the regime decided to look for investors. In a plus of regional foreign Gulf money, also locally, they looked for some investors who used to pump millions of dollars into the economy within the 2000s. This step including the release from prison of Hisham Talat Mustafa, the business investor who built one of the residential gated community called Madinti. And in return of his releasing, he was conditioned to buy 1,000 hectares at the new administrative capital. Sorry. And this is the master plan of the new administrative capital. And he bought actually this spot because it's just across the other side of Madinti. If you can see it, it's highlighted here. So it will be Madinti 2, which is the one we are seeing all the advertising in television about it. An urban violence procedure is used as a strategy of the regime that pushed the urban citizens to be urban frontier, which is the concept I'm referring to today, of the state urban project. The regime decided to build a new Egypt according to the military vision with almost zero political participation or evaluating of these visions. The violence that is followed by the regime, whether physical or symbolic violence, referring to Bourdieu, goes towards implementing a vision of the regime and only of the regime. Since 2015 until today, which is 2020, the new urban agenda starting in hitting of some changes. The transformation started at the very basic level of the television media by changing the calling for prayers footage to be from the new administrative capital, from the new mosque Al-Fattah Al-Alim at the administrative capital. And also for Christians, the January 7th prayer, which is the main feast, is moved to the cathedral at the new administrative capital. And the plan is including to transfer all the embassies into one huge district, in addition to all the governmental buildings as well. These transfers would force Egyptian citizens to find their way to the desert to get their services done, in which asserts the idea of urban frontiers. Frontier, as each urban citizen will have to find commuting ways to the new capital and being exposed to it, whether via public and or private transportation. Which is getting very expensive today on both sides. The plan of moving facilities that means a highly securitized plan to secure the presidential palace, the Ministry of Interior, and Ministry of Defense, in addition to the vital governmental institutions that should not be freezes if the public decided to demonstrate like what happened in January 2011. Gentrification as a globalized plan of governments is coined with securitization. A gentrification in its own guarantee having proper citizens who have official papers, who can get loans, pay mortgage, and are disciplined within the system. This formalized citizen is a product of gentrification. This so-called formal registered citizen is paying tax and living in a transparency with the state, though it means being a citizen of a surveyed life and being part of a society of control, and here I'm citing Duluth. The citizen is imaginary, who has credit cards, bank accounts, and social security number, and tied from the legs into loans whether to facilities and or mortgages. So while the undisciplined citizens are the informal ones who are precarious labor, like Laila was just speaking about Bouazizi, who does not have defined yearly income, they usually don't have bank accounts and they are not sure of their income or their future 5 years plan. These citizens have precarious life, are not connected to the system. Though in the global South context, the formal economy is based on the money circulation within the informal economy. The precarious labor in Egypt are being turned into the urban frontier, and the one who can be crushed for the processes of formalizing the economy into commodifications of lands and basic everyday services like transportation, water, electricity, and roads. The regime expanded urban transformation era to include each corner in the city of what we know today as Cairo. The new urban agenda is not only about the mega projects and investing in the desert, but also SDS 2030 include many transferable projects to the urban life and quality of the core of Cairo, to be transformed into heritage touristic commercial city. This transformation plays role in constituting a memory of the city and the neighborhoods, and the memory that is significant in shaping our everyday life and how we define landmarks or our everyday commutes. We are talking about concrete, bold urban transformation of how we, as citizens of Cairo, deal with the city, its street, and its our everydayness. And I'm not romanticizing the city as to be static or rigid city that don't change or transform, but I touch on the acceleration of these changes. In Egypt, the obvious top-down approach of governing made decision makers deal with the citizens as puppets. The citizens were not consulted in major urban transformation policies. The local committees at neighborhoods evaporated since 2011, and until today, we have no law actually to govern the local participation of local committees, which is المجالس الشعبية المحلية in Arabic. This absence of local governance turned the citizens as guests of the country, and all the doors are closed to call on the ministry or the municipalities to ask them about any changes. One of the mega project concerned with constructing new roads, which is called the roads of Sisi. By force, the streets changed in the design of its traffic in order to accommodate highways to the flow of the new administrative capital. The geographical joint between Cairo we know today and the Cairo to be are two neighborhoods, which is in the northwestern of Cairo, which is Heliopolis and Nasr City. And since November 2019, both neighborhoods are turned into war zones. The greeners are being demolished, bulldozers cut trees and palms for the sake of widen the street lanes that upgraded the street level from level 2 to level 4, which is it's like if you have a street of 2 lanes and then suddenly it becomes 4 and 5 lanes per one direction. This constitutes a crisis for the residents of suddenly not being able to cross the streets as the designer didn't design walking stops for the car flows. Each person in Nasr City and or Heliopolis became an urban frontier to deal with everyday risks. First, the risk is to be killed by the speedy car while crossing the street. Second, losing the green area and the quality of life. Third, the real estate market value changed into unknown direction. We are talking about two neighborhoods that contains privileged citizens, educated ones, a class of Afandeya, which we call in Arabic, who pay the price of choosing a life in a certain urban quality of life. The changes in the street traffic included removal of tunnels and building massive number of concrete solid bridges. And bridges are wide and have a rigid gray looking as cold, brutal architecture that makes the scene ugly and not human. The residents suddenly became an urban frontier of a fight of achieving the operation of the new administrative capital, but over their bodies, that is the price of the new liberal authoritarianism. The residents decided to organize and form a committee in order to negotiate with the municipalities, but all their efforts evaporated. It's not solved until today, and the government continued in their plans. And the photo that you are seeing is the before and after of Hagaz Square at Heliopolis. Other social classes are not in a better position and are facing violence of disposition. One of the major SDGs as far as the S2030 is to create a city free of slums. Slums has been labeled in Egypt since 2008, when ISDF, which is Informal Settlement Development Fund, established. And in 2010, they released a criteria following UN Habitat International to mark the areas with 4 different degrees of risk to human life. And they made a map contains of like 400 areas all around Egypt, marking those areas as informal settlements. And the government in 2018 announced that by 2020, Egypt will be free of slums in 2 years, a civilized, urbanized city. Since 2014, the government announced working on 357 neighborhoods with a budget of 41 billion Egyptian pounds, which is 2.6 billion US dollars. And before the Egyptian revolution of January 2011, 13,500 families were actually relocated from inside Great Cairo region to the prefers in the satellite cities at Al-Nahda, Salam, and Masakin Osman in 6th of October. So post-2013 regime followed the same plan. This is about building massive number of social housing buildings in semi-deserted districts and relocate the residents of informal settlements into these buildings. The million of dollars in post-2013 do construct social housing all over Egypt in order to relocate the informal settlements resident all over Egypt. A new relocation criteria code was written by the government and the municipalities that supposedly all social housing administrative committees to follow the same code. But this code was written as for Maspero triangle residence, which is what you are seeing now in front of you. So the relocation of the 3,500 and more families was a pilot project of the government at one of the most vital locations in Cairo. And Maspero Triangle is part of Boulay Abu Ala district and looking over the Nile, the River Nile, and the code including giving the residents the 3 options of whether to be compensated in kind, that means whether to get an apartment in a social housing project or reside at the same neighborhood after the upgrading. And the 3rd option was to be compensated by money. Maspero Triangle was the pilot project of the government that made everything implemented as planned and as written by the code. While in the following years, especially at Old Cairo, like what you're seeing now in front of you, there were 4 different places that were demolished in the last year, 2019, and the residents got forced evicted before they got their new apartments as a social housing projects. That made them homeless for months and some of them for a year now. Widowed and divorced cannot get apartments at the social housing project as the rent is 300 Egyptian pounds per month and their monthly pension is not more than the same value of the monthly rent. That made many elders, single mothers, homeless with no housing. None of the rules of the code were followed at Old Cairo, and the residents who objected the government were jailed for some days for at the local police stations in the neighborhood to ensure that they don't complain to the media. One journalist was stopped while documenting the eviction. My role as an urban activist was barely trying to knock the doors of any governmental institutions in order only for the residents to get their apartments as a social housing projects. I complained with the signature of the residents to the Human Rights Committee Council, in addition to the administrative prosecution that is handling the corruption of other governmental institutions. I had recorded testimonies of how the local municipalities of Old Cairo district asked the citizens for bribes in order to give them units at the social housing. The residents who were lucky and were compensated with a more apartments had to pay 4,000 Egyptian pounds, which is $250 at once, as a security deposit for their apartments. According to my survey of a sample at Old Cairo, almost half of the residents didn't get any apartments, which represent a basic violation to their rights. In parallel to forced evictions of their neighborhood, there is what I call negotiated evictions, what happened in Maspero Triangle, as plans has been announced of investment and touristic projects at the evicted location all along Cairo. Maspero Triangle, Old Cairo, Warraq Island development project has been announced surrounding Ain al-Sira Lake and also behind the aqueduct of Magra al-Ayun, which is in front of you now. Moreover, Warraq Island, where the project is announced and the residents are not evicted yet, and the land tenure was all transferred to the new urban community authorities. So as explained above, majority of the urban agenda following the social meaning of social strata have not been saved of these urban transformations. Even the privileged stratas like the residents of Heliopolis or Madinat Nasr City are being negatively affected with these transformations. Urban citizens have been pushed to be frontiers of changes that they never signed up for. The processes of urban transformation constitute a preventing of practicing citizenship or any kind of partnership of what we called home, or what I'm using in Arabic is watan. The regime punishes the citizens by preventing them of practicing basic means of everydayness governance system, the non-existence of local committees, in addition to the regime message that urban citizens cannot speak. Urban citizens are not the children who are in the care of, as if we are in the care of an abusive father and who is taking the lead, and the complement system does not exist. The father who come home after a working day holding a leather belt to keep kicking the children for only asking a spontaneous child question like why the sky is blue. The manifestations of authoritarianism do grow in Egypt to silence whoever want to have a voice. The message is clear of the fact that the current regime built 12 new prisons. This is scary to death. This regime follows the religion of neoliberalism of profit at all costs, that turn Korean residents into urban frontiers who cannot get away with being jailed or die in a fight for their homes and their basic rights of citizenship. The masculine vibe of the father who may kill his girl because she decided to argue with him. Citizens can be jailed because of an anti-state comment on Facebook that led to forced disappearance into the corridors of the security buildings. As an instance, the status of Ibrahim Azzeddin, who you can see his photo now to your right, an urban researcher who criticized the urban agenda, and then he disappeared for more than 7 months. And he's in jail now until I wrote this text, until I'm doing this presentation. This regime humiliates and inferiors the citizens in a way that constitutes urban violence in the everydayness of their ruling, and making enemies of the citizens is what putting them to be the urban frontiers of the Korean context. Thank you.